Hey everyone, thanks for joining today, and I hope everyone's having a good time so far. Hopefully, the sessions have been insightful. I'm super excited to have two of the largest homegrown brands which need no introduction whatsoever for the next session. Product leaders from Flipkart and Sharechat. Fortunate to have Arindam and Mithun from Flipkart and Sharechat. Arindam has been with Flipkart with probably almost 7 years now, been through multiple big billion days, survived all of them to be with us here today. I'm sure a roller coaster of a ride over the last couple of years. Would love to hear more from you, Arindam, on what's up at Flipkart and what's your current role.
Thanks so much, Yash, for having me. Really excited. Yes, you're right. I've seen all the big billion days. I think that's my claim to fame at Flipkart. It's been more than 6.5 years now at Flipkart. Started off with leading the pricing and the promotions platforms, pretty much at the center of e-commerce, as center as you can go, and build those platforms from the grounds up. And From 2016 onwards, I've been leading consumer growth pieces, including all the user experience, design, and user research pieces along with that. And over the last 1 year, I've been leading product and engineering specifically for retention and engagement. Interestingly, I started my career with Procter and Gamble, manufacturing diapers like the Pampers diapers. And over the years, from manufacturing diapers to selling them online, I think it's been quite a journey for me. So yeah, I think enjoyed every bit of it.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us today. And I'm sure the audience has a lot to learn from some of the insights that we're about to learn today. Next up, we have Mithun from ShareChat. I guess one of the boldest bets that I had seen 4 or 5 years back when they said, you know what, there's not going to be any English in this app. You have to sign in with one of the regional languages. From that day, probably 5 years back, to be, probably the largest vernacular social network today. Mithun, you lead the product there. Please help us with a quick introduction, please.
Hey, excited to be here. Yes, thanks for that short introduction. So my name is Mithun. I look at consumer product at Sharechat and not MoEngage as of now, right? So we have two competing products, and we are sort of splitting up the product organization to make sure we do justice to both of them. It's been a great journey here, especially the last 2 years. I joined just as we were sort of scaling 8 million DAUs, and the last 2 years we've managed to hit. I think right now it's 40 is where we are right now, right? And that's just ShareChat and merge another 10 to 15, depending on the day where you look at. It's been a roller coaster ride, and I think being alone in this space at this scale is a great learning experience for us, and I'd be happy to share those insights with this group as well.
Thanks, Mithun. And I'm sure probably the scale that you're talking about is unheard of, right? 40 million plus DAUs.
Right.
What does product-led growth mean for you at this scale, Mithun? Like, what's your thoughts on that?
So I think it's important for everybody to understand the nature of the product, right? And I know there has been a lot of noise around the short video space and Chinese competitors, etc. What we have to fundamentally understand is that the content that we serve to our users has never been served at this scale and at this level of personalization before we came onto the platform, right? So the fundamental need we are solving for the user is availability of regional content, personalized and delivered to you at scale, right? Uh, with that construct, it becomes obvious that we are a sort of two-sided marketplace. There are creators who are putting content on our products, and we are doing our best to match that content to the right person. We while we have a lot of focus on the creator aspect and how that content comes into the system, primarily it is a discovery led product, right? So we split discovery into both algorithm and feed driven discovery and also product level discovery. So the feed and the algorithms are where we have invested significantly over the last 2.5 years, and we will continue to invest significantly. I think at this scale, we are probably the largest infrastructure for AI that we've set up, and it is specifically India focused. Uh, so that's one aspect. However, we also, being sort of early movers in this space and considering our audience is very, very new to the internet and naive to digital products, we also have a significant focus on product-led discoveries, right? So we've invested in search and discovery, a menu-driven discovery product, which sort of forms the core of our app. And I think continuing to tweak these levers is the core of where we are right now, in both Sharechat and Moj, and that's what we'll continue building on in the next year or so.
Awesome. I think that's very insightful, and I'm sure AI at this scale is again very unheard of. Keen to learn more on that as well in the coming minutes or so. Arindam, coming back to you, you look at user experience and growth from a product standpoint, right? Like, how does the interplay between these two work? And would love to hear more on that.
Yeah, sure. So let me actually share an anecdote. Back in 2017, we launched referrals. So referrals, I think, it's a very common construct. Everybody does it, and we tried it out. Right? We failed. Right? We failed because there was widespread fraud. Pretty much most of the companies which have tried out referrals, I think that's perhaps one construct where you will see widespread fraud, right? And we did it and we failed. We managed to figure out what kind of fraud was happening. And we pulled back the construct, iterated, closed that loop, launched again. Again failed. Again, another different kind of fraud, right? Tried it multiple times, right? And each different time we were discovering a very different kind of fraudulent kind of behavior coming in. But I think every time we were learning what is it that is working, what is it that's not working. And we were monitoring and analyzing the metrics, looking at all the different cohorts, right? What's the behavior across different cohorts? And that really helped us to keep iterating. And while doing all of this, there's a very deep focus that was going in to understand consumer psychology, analyzing the metrics, building out a growth model that can scale, right? Because this is something which has very deep business impact as well. You're looking at your customer acquisition costs and all of that. So in all of this, if you think about it, that's the learning mindset coming in. That's a iterating multiple times over and over again that's coming in. And that's where product and growth, I believe, always go hand in hand. Because if you look at it, there are kind of three things around which growth revolves. Mm-hmm. One, doing the business fundamentals really well across the board, be that acquisition all the way to kind of referral. The second one is removing the friction points that might exist in the user's journey. And the third thing is kind of really trying to nurture the human nature, right? And which is where kind of you look at it, it's an interplay of sorts. The moment you're thinking about nurturing the human nature, you are going deep into understanding consumer psychology. You are trying to kind of build out the right experiences with the right nudges in place and all of that. And you can look at growth as a combination of acquisition, retention, engagement, monetization, the typical pieces. But if you unpack that growth stack, right, as Andy Carville puts it, there are a lot of those levers, and you're trying to kind of get all of those levers to work in harmony. And that's where the magic actually comes in. And that's where kind of I always believe across all of these things, it's a product mindset with that learning kind of attitude, looking at the data part of it, understanding consumer psychology, which kind of keeps driving growth. Yeah.
Amazing. I mean, it's very interesting to learn that you still continue to experiment at such a high scale as well.
Absolutely. That's the only way you can learn in my mind, right? And I always believe experiment not to validate your kind of hypothesis, experiment to learn. Because if you kind of have that mindset, you will know something new, which will kind of spur the innovation going forward.
Awesome. So when you're launching some of these new experiments or when you're working on growth in general, Arindam, what are some of the key metrics that you track from a product manager standpoint or a product leader standpoint? How do you measure this entire engagement and retention per se at a high level?
Yeah, see, I think when it comes to metrics, I operate with a couple of principles. First is, what do I want to measure to understand if the problem is actually being solved or not? Mm-hmm. And the second is, like, given the data, how would I actually want to analyze that metric, right? To learn about interesting patterns. And it's important to kind of do both of these, because otherwise you're not going to be looking forward. Uh, so the way we have looked at it, and I think it's a typical thing, it's nothing kind of different, but uh, if you look at it, acquisition, how many new users are coming to your platform, activation, which usually many people miss out on, by the way, activation, how many new users are doing the core action in a given period of time. Usually, if you ask a lot of people, they'll say, oh, activation is like, okay, people who have signed up on my platform. In my mind, that's not the core action, because on e-commerce, for example, that core action might be add to cart, right? So unless and until that person is actually doing that core action, that person is perhaps not activated. Retention, how many users are active on the platform, performing that core action. Engagement, how active are they? So if you think about retention and engagement, it kind of is a T of sorts, right? Wherein retention is more of the breadth, and engagement is more of the depth, right? Which is how many users are active and how active are they. And how active are they? Metrics like time spent on the platform come in very handy to really figure out, especially if you're working on engagement pieces. The last piece, again, which is something which is missed out many a times, is resurrection, which is users who might have been active earlier, but off late they're not active, they've fallen off the radar. And how many of them have you been able to bring back and make them active again? So I think that's how we have kind of looked at it. Overall, more, I think it's nothing kind of very different, but I think interestingly, I think what we started off with though was kind of just about analyzing these metrics. And I think what we've realized over time is that looking at these metrics over a period of time allows you to identify a lot of these patterns, and versus just looking at it on a daily basis or a weekly basis, you perhaps miss out on a lot of those patterns. And that's what we've started doing it. And we've started looking at it also from a cohort point of view, because different cohorts of users, again, behave very differently.
Got it. A quick follow-up question there. So, I mean, from all of these KPI standpoint, is it product that's owning up these metrics, and you have CRM and marketing teams sort of assisting you with it, or how does the interplay work between you and the CRM and the marketing teams?
Yeah, it's kind of a shared ownership there. It's more of a partnership model that we have tried to move towards, because if you think about it, everyone's going after the same objective. It's not that the business guy is going after a very different objective. So if you work in partnership, it always allows for a better brainstorming and a better focus on what we need to do. And many a times when you're working on certain product constructs, you need the support from the business side, be that in terms of budgets or be that in terms of kind of running certain campaigns and stuff like that. So if you're both on the same page across the board, it allows for that harmony to kick in. So we've tried to kind of move towards that shared ownership. We look at these metrics also in a shared manner. Yeah.
Awesome. That's very helpful. Mithun, coming back to you, I have personally seen a very robust metric tracking mechanism with Sharechat. What can you tell our audience today about, what are some of the key things that you track? And, it's not a transactional platform, very different business. What are some of the things that you wake up in the morning and say, hey, you know what, these are the key things that keep me up in the night?
Yeah, so I think it would be good to set some context here, right? And as you rightly mentioned, we operate in a very, very different world from any transactions company, anything in the e-commerce space or the payment space, or anywhere where the customers have to spend money to get value from the service, right? We operate in a space where anything where you can be entertained is our competitor, right? So you can have TV as a competitor. When IPL comes in, we have to wonder what we can do to supplement our engagement and time spent numbers, because people are necessarily going to jump to platforms like Hotstar, right? So in that sense, ours is not a very, how do I put it, a sticky use case in the competitive environment, right? And that means the problems that we face in terms of retaining users are that much harder. I think by and large, the metrics that we track are similar, right? I think for something in e-commerce world, we would be looking at transacting customers as a headline metric. But for us, that is a transaction is you opening the app. So daily actives and monthly actives are a measure of activeness and stickiness respectively. And then we cut those by multiple cohorts. One important sort of cut for us is language, right? Because we operate in 15 Indian languages. We have multiple sort of communities within each of these language. When an event happens in a particular language, we expect DAU there to go up. Our biggest days of the years are typically festival days where people come on the platform to engage with content that they want. So language cutting by language is very important for us, and actually looking at that regional variation. We also sort of try to cut it by cohorts of activity types, right? So fundamentally, people are here to entertain themselves. So they entertain themselves by either engaging or sharing content, right? You mentioned good morning and wishes and this kind of content. It's actually a pretty large category for our user base, right? So we look at users who engage. We also look at users who do another set of core actions on our app, which is watching a video or spending time watching a video, right? So these two cohorts we look at differently in the way we sort of want to isolate their journey and isolate their activity on the app. I think an important thing from our perspective, again, because the environment is so different, we are competing with anything that could entertain you. We always try to have a very, very strong product intuition when we look at data, right? So when we run experiments on the feed, for example, right, the experiment is of the construct of showing a different set of content to a particular user. But we also have to get really deep into the psychology of that user, saying, hey, he's here to spend time or to engage with content. When we make these tweaks to the algorithm, this is how we expect the content that he sees to change. And by virtue of that content changing, this is the metric that we expect to change, right? For example, if we start surfacing more high quality videos on the feed, what we expect to see is time spent going up, but not necessarily engagement, right? Because videos we know are a less engageable category, but it drives a lot of time spent. So we track those metrics at an experiment level and at an overall sort of retention and DAU level. So I think that sort of puts us in a different frame of mind, although the overall framework in terms of acquisition, activation, retention remains the same, but we generally have to go a lot deeper to get to the core of the problem.
And in your case, like probably some of these, it's also easy to fall into the trap of vanity metrics, right? Because it's not like there's a purchase happening or there's like a revenue North Star metric, right? So how do you sort of, I mean, what are some of the pitfalls that people who are working in this industry should watch out for?
So like while DAU is a good headline metric to track, right? And it gives you a day on day or week on week context on what is happening in terms of users engaging with your app. It is also important for us to measure engagement and also cut that engagement by cohorts, right? So typically in a social app, right? And you can think back to your usage of popular social media like Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. What happens is when you are sort of early in your journey, you feel like clicking a lot of buttons, right? You feel like exploring the app, liking a lot of posts, engaging with friends, etc., etc. But now, and like if you think back to your usage of Facebook, maybe over the last 10 years, right? You would be posting a lot, you would be sharing a lot of content, you'll be liking it. But now, by and large, you're just consuming content, right? Without actively interacting with it, right? So if you just look at engagement, which is, let's say, like, share, and comment, as a Facebook product manager, you'd probably see that number going down for users who are retained longer on the platform. But that's not necessarily not a bad thing, right? Because as a lieu of this engagement, the user who's retained more is actually spending more time, right? Yeah. So the psychology of the user and how he is placed within his time on your social network is a very, very important factor when you're deciding what metrics to look at, right? So yeah,
makes a lot of sense. I think I'm coming back to you. I know you mentioned about the referrals as one of the experiments that you've tried and drove over a good amount of time. What is probably one or two other examples where you can talk about some product-led intervention, to drive stickiness and retention per se, and what's the role of, say, automation in that whole piece.
Yeah. So let's take the example before we come to Flipkart. Let's take the example of a product which we consider sticky, right? I'm guessing Facebook is the first thing that will come to everyone's minds, right? But if you think about why it is sticky, we go to Flipkart to kind of Facebook to maybe pass our time, or it's become a habit of sorts, and you're getting some inherent kind of dopamine kind of rushes there, right? And what Facebook does pretty well is it will keep sending you those notifications saying, oh, so many people liked it, and this and that. At the core of it, to drive stickiness, I feel there are two things that work. One is you need to really enable the user to get his or her job done. The user is pretty much coming to the platform, keeping something in mind, either to pass their time or to kind of get some value and things like that. And the second is how do you nurture that human nature? Okay. Now, and that's pretty much the framework which we've used to work on a lot of constructs at Flipkart. So one of the things that we did in video very recently, and we've launched video about 1.5 years ago, we realized that when the user is watching a video game show, his or her key motivation is to win rewards. That's the reason why the user is actually viewing that video game show. And whenever you're talking about something like winning, inherently you are pointing towards that emotion of greed. It comes pretty much hand in hand. So we doubled down on that. And what we did was once the viewer was about to finish one game show, we would tell the user that, hey, you've become one step closer to winning kind of the mega reward of the day. To do that, you need to finish watching the second or play the second game show. And it had amazing results for us. What happened as a result of it was the overall time spent, which was the critical metric that we were going after, the depth of activity that we were talking about earlier, the engagement part of it, that increased, the time spent on the platform increased. Because that increased, it had a rub-off effect on retention also overall, because suddenly you've started utilizing the benefit of this platform a lot more. You've spent 5 minutes, and another 5 minutes, and then another 5 minutes, right? And without realizing that you have actually spent overall 15 minutes, versus if I had actually asked you to see a 15-minute show, I'm pretty sure it would have dropped off at 5 minutes, right? So that's the thing which we've been kind of focused on, which is why today at Flipkart Video, if you see, we've moved towards kind of more bite-sized content, right? And not bite-sized to the TikTok side of things, not 30 seconds or anything, because we're operating in a slightly different content genre. But mostly you will see the content kind of playing in that between 5 to 7 minute kind of mark, right? And as you can imagine, these insights have also shaped up our content strategy. So think about how growth can overall have a bigger impact into the overall model with which you're approaching it. So I think, and as we've, to your second part of the question of the tech play out here, the role that tech plays, if you think about it, with so many users playing these kind of video game shows, you're talking about concurrency, number one. You're talking about storage and compute at that kind of scale, and at a segment of one, because each user is perhaps seeing a different game show, right? To start off with. So what show to present the second time around or the third time around is going to be very different. So the scale and the complexity that comes with the scale, because you're operating at a segment of one, requires a huge investment in tech infrastructure as well. And in Flipkart, we've always kind of taken pride in building out a lot of these pieces of infrastructure in house. And I think that's where kind of a lot of capability gets built, a lot of innovation happens, and a lot of that moat gets generated from the technology perspective.
I hear a lot of consumer psychology in general from you. Have you sort of done a minor now in psychology? And it's very interesting, actually, the way you.
Fascinating, actually, to sometimes know how humans think. And each of us think in a very different manner. And the better you are at observing your consumers, the better off you will be to really serve your consumers.
Awesome. Thanks a lot for that. Mithun, just taking a cue from that, and I think feed is probably one of the more controversial parts, even for apps like probably say Facebook or Twitter and all of that, right? Like so, you spoke a lot about feed and discovery and the entire product interventions there. What are some of the other things that you've been looking at to drive the overall stickiness and retention per se? Would love to hear more on that topic.
Right. I think I'll just take a leaf from Arindam's book on user psychology. Right. What tends to happen with the user base that engages with products like ours, right? If you form a persona, roughly there'll be tier two, tier three Indians first time on the internet in the last 5 years. WhatsApp is the first time they've interacted with anyone online, probably friends in some WhatsApp groups. They are not comfortable in English at all, but there is a very, very deep sort of connection with their local language and local content and entertainment content in that local language, right? Now, I'm sure a lot of us have done this in the last 5 years, right? If you look back 15 years ago, there was this trend in the web 1.0 era of greeting cards being created and you sending those links to users, right? Now, if somebody asked you or somebody sent you a link of that sort, you would immediately sort of judge that person, right? I mean, what is this guy doing? Why is he doing it? But you step back a bit, right, and talk to maybe your uncle, right, who's not lived in Bangalore, who's probably lived in a tier two city, and look at his WhatsApp messages and the kind of content he gets. Within his network, that kind of content is super viral, right? Because the way we look at content, the way we look at aesthetics, etc., is very, very different. We are probably more tuned to a Western, white background, super clean feed, like slick product kind of ecosystem. Whereas these users are in a very, very different frame of mind, right? And that's why we take pride in being called the wishes factory, right? Because we found a need, and we solved really, really well for it. And I think we've done multiple iterations of solving for that need. A very good use case that we found was, and I think a bunch of other companies, maybe in the panel itself, have also sort of gotten inspired by it. What we figured out was that people want to send wishes to each other on festivals like Diwali, right? But what really sort of puts that touch on that personal touch on those wishes is if you as a user are able to add your name, saying Mithun and family wishes you a happy Diwali, right? And if you put that in a visual sort of setting, right, with an animation where it actually looks like a card, people like just go bonkers, right? So within our main app, within our wishes category, we actually built out a web element which allowed you to input your name, share that image, and we sort of took a screenshot of that and put it on WhatsApp, right? And that sort of became extremely viral, right? And people started coming to our app just to look at that wishes content, put their name in, customize it with their family, and sort of send it out. So these are the kind of things that we like continuously innovate on, like looking at users who've been underserved by current products and sort of work very, very closely on fulfilling those needs, because we're pretty sure that nobody else is going to do it, right? Because from a tier one educated product manager in multiple product companies in India, you're not really going to think of these user pain points, right? You want to work on flashy stuff, but we are very okay to get down and dirty and actually look at people's WhatsApp groups and see what content is going viral and then just build out for it.
Absolutely. I think even for me, the discovery happened because of a watermark of Sharechat in
Right.
one images or videos. And I was like, wow, what is this app? Let me go check it out.
Right.
Definitely something that worked for sure. So just a quick question on this entire new sort of app that you've launched, right? MoEngage. I don't know how much you'll be able to comment on that, but what's similar, what's different from a user engagement retention standpoint? Any thoughts you're able to share there?
Yeah. So I think with Sharechat, right, we were the first movers, right? And we did a lot of growth hacking in the early stages to just figure out this pain point of regional content. And I think that story is pretty well put out in media, multiple WhatsApp groups, hacking, Facebook groups, all that kind of stuff until we came out with our app. So we were the pioneers in going through the motions there. But with Moj, actually, the market was created, right? There was a lot of latent demand as soon as competitors got pushed out of the market. And there, our framework of thinking was entirely different. We indexed on speed. So from start to finish to launching on the App Store, on the Play Store, we took 30 hours, right? And that's a testament to the kind of framework we built internally at ShareChat. We were able to reuse a lot of the tech and a lot of the backend to just make sure we got the app in people's hands. And also to the fact that we are willing to sort of like be the first movers, right? And since then, a lot of our growth has been driven organically. The same kind of constructs in terms of content acquisition, personalization of the feed apply on Moj as well. The key difference, to answer your second point, is the short video format is particularly useful for the entertainment kind of use case, right? Like the snackable content is a theme everywhere, right? And if you personalize the feed well enough, you have a winning product. On ShareChat, although personalization is a very, very large theme, the kind of content is much more diverse, right? So we have users who are finding use cases all the way from entertainment to utility. So entertainment is video watching and like sort of talking to people who have similar interests as you within chat rooms, and utilities all the way to finding that perfect wishes content to put on that WhatsApp group. So in that sense, the types of content, the types of users are a little bit more diverse on ShareChat. Having said that, we also have like a large video watching use case, but it is not just short video, right? We have short, long, medium-sized videos, etc. So I think that's the key difference. Moj is a much more focused product, right? And it has a very specific use case. ShareChat has a bunch of use cases which users are using it for, and I think that's the key difference.
And do you see a lot of crosswalk between the two products? One set of users feeding into the other?
So that is I think one of our key strengths, right? We have actually a lot of information which we use to personalize content for our ShareChat users, right? And we are able to use that intelligence and that on those models to just sort of plug it into Moj and iterate very quickly on that, right? Additionally, like because they are sister products, we are able to use a lot of our sort of understanding and product positioning to make sure that Moj is top of mind for consumers looking specifically for the short video use case. From a framework standpoint, we are actually like actively building out the organization to make sure we have a very good backend in terms of horizontal things that can be used across both products, primarily on the AI and content creation pieces, right? So these are plug and play modules that we want to be able to use in both of these products.
Awesome. Arinder, coming back to you on the topics that you're talking about, videos and games, right? So are you able to share some insights around what's like the engagement, or like what's like the transactions of users who are engaging with some of these new initiatives, like say videos or gaming, and be it in terms of retention or the overall purchases itself? Are you able to share some?
Yes, I think before I go on to kind of how we are doing, I think it's important to kind of first lay out, because a lot of people have asked me this question as to why is Flipkart doing games or video. I think if you think about it, I think none of us would be shopping every day, right? Like wishful thinking, definitely from us, but it's kind of unreasonable there. Now, given that reality, how do you try to get the users to the platform more frequently, more often? So that was the problem statement with which we were starting off. And why does that matter? Because it helps you to kind of get more top of mind share, right? I'm sure like you wouldn't have seen any marketing campaigns for WhatsApp, right? Because you're using it every day. That's the best form of marketing that you can have. And that was a similar thought process, that can we have constructs where we can tap into the phases in the user's journey where they are not in an active shopping mode. And if you think about what people would be doing if they're not shopping, apart from spending their time on social, etc., gaming was a big element, and kind of entertainment was another big element, right? And which is what kind of led us to start working on it. Having said that, we always try to kind of answer this question of why is it that the user would come to Flipkart to play games, for that matter, also watch videos. And the answer that we were getting again and again was that uh, on Flipkart, you can get to win rewards, which gives you additional value in shopping, which is something which you play a Candy Crush, you're not going to get any rewards. You're going to get a good dopamine hit, but you're not going to get any tangible rewards. In this case, you will be. And that's been the biggest draw for kind of Flipkart games and Flipkart video overall. And we have scaled really, really fast. And all of this has happened over the last 1.5 years. Um, and like the kind of growth that we've seen has also led to significant investments. You might have already heard about our acquisition of a gaming studio. So an e-commerce company kind of acquiring a gaming studio is not very common, and that goes on to show the kind of faith that the leadership has, given the growth that we've been able to deliver. In terms of kind of, just to give you an idea, I wouldn't be able to share exact metrics again because of corporate reasons, but to give you a sense of the difference, for example, in video, uh, the video completion rates in the industry usually hover at around 30 to 35% max, right? For us, it's close to 90%. Okay, and that's what should give you an idea of the kind of stickiness that we have on the platform, because yeah, I think we've been able to kind of really dig into the micro pieces of the product constructs, which has really helped us to grow this fast. Yeah.
Awesome. Very interesting insights indeed. In the interest of time, I think I'll quickly move to some of the questions from the audience. I think Aman has a question for you, Mithun. How have notifications as a channel helped you to drive incremental engagement? Trust me, not from someone from MoEngage.
Yeah, I think the use case for notifications for us is like very different compared to even a Facebook, right? Like Facebook is a friends network and primarily driven by voyeurism, and you can use a lot of those connections that you have on the app to sort of drive people back into the app, saying, "Hey, XYZ in your friend list did ABC," and you would immediately want to spend some time there, right? For us, notifications is more around sort of surfacing the trends of around the topics that you're interested in, and make sure that we use that as a hook to get you back into the app and spend more time in it, right? So that's roughly the way we think about notifications. I think for us also, from a UI and sort of content perspective, notifications is emerging to be a very interesting place where you can consume content directly, right? Rather than you needing to come into the app, right? So, for example, if there is a breaking news event, what we are seeing is that people actually scroll through the notification and sort of draw it down. And obviously, we don't have a lot of data for this. This is just qualitative. They expand the notification, look at the heading, look at the caption, and use it as a way to consume content without necessarily having to open the app, right? So I think these are the two sort of key levers around which we are basing our entire notifications strategy.
Thanks, Mithun. That's very helpful. Arindam, you spoke a lot about consumer psychology, so I'd want you to take the next question from Samir, which is more around how do you see through the clutter and how do you develop product intuition? I know it's a slightly broad question and we could spend hours answering this, but any short answer would be really helpful.
Yeah, I think. See, I think you really. I believe like if you really have the knack around observing your users, right, or observing people in general, right, and maybe I have that knack. At the back of my mind, it always goes on. Okay, like how does this person think, right? Or and that's the try. That's what I try to kind of gauge from my discussion. So if you try to kind of develop that knack around really understanding yeah, people around you. Um, I think that can actually help you develop that. I feel I think again it's a very broad question that way. I don't have any specific pieces of advice, but I think the more you talk to your users, I think you will get into that habit of trying to understand the mental models, force yourself to really understand how they might be thinking, and you'll be able to see some patterns there. Yeah.
Probably any books or podcasts that helped you build at least a framework around this?
There are a bunch of them. I think the first thing perhaps is something called the wheel of emotion, uh,
Mhm.
and you can just Google it and see it, and you'll be able to understand there are different kinds of emotion: positive emotions, negative emotions, and all of that. And even in positive emotions, it's kind of it's broken down to different parts. uh, Different actions that we take are usually triggered or associated with these different kind of emotions, and that's something which I try to always bake in into any product construct that I'm working in. What is the kind of emotion that I want to evoke? Is
Sure.
that an emotion of kind of pure delight or surprise, right? Or is that an emotion of sometimes fear, right? And we've done across the board. Classic case, for example, you'll see a lot of platforms have urgency messaging that only hurry, only to left. That's
Yeah.
nothing but trying to evoke that emotion of fear of loss. um, so those are some of the things. So I think Wheel of Fortune, I think that's the first thing that comes to my mind. It can be an interesting one to look at.
Thank you.
Not Wheel of Fortune, sorry, Wheel of Emotion. Sorry.
Yeah, that's very helpful. Mithun, I see a bunch of questions around Moj and Sharechat and all of that, but probably I think there's Watsala from Language Curry who's trying to understand what are some of the in-app engagement strategies that didn't work for you, probably.
Okay. So uh, again, we are a content consumption and entertainment app, right? The main product is the algorithm driven feed. Uh, we generally do not try a lot of in-app promotion strategies like pop-ups, etc., because we know for sure that the best way to get the user to come back tomorrow is make sure every content piece he sees is something that he enjoys, right? So all our focus across AI and product pods is to make sure that the experience of content consumption and content discovery is as smooth as possible, right? Having said that, we have sort of done minor experiments on driving a little bit of discovery, but we make sure that uh, it is not sort of too pushy, right? So, for example, we have an explore product which is a menu driven discover kind of product. So we try and find users who've not engaged with a lot of content in the past X sessions. We trigger a minor pop-up saying, "Hey, have you not found something you like? Maybe you'd want to explore these other content categories," right? And this is probably the extent to which we go in app strategies apart from working on the feed.
Awesome. And are you able to comment on monetization from next billion users?
I mean, broadly, yes. The strategies remain the same. Ads is something that we've actively worked on in the last 2-3 quarters. We've done some minor experiments on chat rooms and audio monetization. We will continue to work on sort of live streaming use cases in the future. But I think the important part to understand here is there is a lot of how do I put it, uh, nuance to the way we would want to monetize these users, right? And I think there's an interesting anecdote that I always share. So Facebook ads, they have a lead generation kind of ad construct, right? So you should try and find any of these lead generation ads being run by travel companies, right? Especially for packages. The ad would look something like travel to Thailand for 3-4 days with your family, and click here to book now. When you click that ad, it'll ask you for your name, phone number, falana, n number of data points, etc. Right? Uh, Now, if you're a tier one user, you'd be like, okay, am I okay sharing my phone number? Some people will say yes, some people will say no. Some people will actually give their phone number, get a call from the agent because Facebook sort of captures that data point and sends it to the publisher. But if you look through these comments, right, on that particular post, there'll be definitely more comments than the leads entered, right? And these comments are all, here's my phone number XYZ, call me, right? Here's my phone number, call me. And I'll be sort of looking at or thinking about the guy who ran these ads, who's a digital marketer in some MNC, and he's wondering why his lead conversion is so low. But if he had looked at the 10 ads he's run and just tried to scrape the comments, he would get 2x, 3x conversion, right? So the way that the user is going to engage with ads is also going to be very, very fundamentally different. And I think there's a large opportunity for us to sort of innovate there.
Awesome. I think in the interest of time, I'm going to wrap up this session at this point, and please feel free to reach out to Arindam or Mithun on LinkedIn, probably Twitter DM with some of these questions. I see, Arindam, I think there are a couple of more questions around the entire board, how's like say videos, games, and all of that impacting retention. Probably a follow-up post from you on LinkedIn on that piece would be super helpful. But Arindam also mentions that he's more than happy to mentor any early stage startups, PMs as well. So please feel free to write back to him on LinkedIn as well. And with that, I'd like to bring this session to a close. Thank you so much, Arindam and Mithun, for joining us today. It's super insightful.